They glide beneath the waves like ghosts, silent, ancient, and built to kill. Sharks aren't just predators. They're perfected survival machines, turning clear waters into chaos with a single strike. One drop of blood, one wrong move, and you're part of the food chain. In this video, we dive into 6 jaw-dropping shark encounters. From a bloody fashion shoot gone wrong to 2 women devoured during a selfie with a monster shark. These are the moments when terror surfaced without warning. The coastal waters off Toliara, Madagascar, had always been notorious among local fishermen for their unpredictable currents and the massive predators that lurked beneath the surface. In 2019, this remote stretch of the Mozambique Channel became the backdrop for one of the most shocking shark encounters ever documented. The area, known locally as Anacao Bay, sits where the warm Indian Ocean meets shallow coral reefs, creating perfect hunting grounds for great white sharks migrating along the African coast. Svetlana Kozlova and Tatiana Petrov, 2 26-year-old marketing executives from Moscow, had arrived in Madagascar 3 days earlier as part of a budget backpacking tour across East Africa. The women had specifically chosen the lesser-known southern coast of Madagascar to avoid the tourist crowds that flocked to the northern beaches. Their tour guide, a local man named Remy, had repeatedly warned them about venturing too far into the water during low tide, explaining that the rocky coves often trapped marine life, including sharks seeking shelter or food. The morning of March 15th started like any other day of their vacation. Svetlana and Tatiana had woken early to catch the sunrise over the Indian Ocean, armed with their waterproof cameras and an insatiable desire for the perfect social media content. The tide was exceptionally low that morning, exposing vast stretches of sandy bottom and creating shallow pools between the jagged coral formations that dotted the coastline. As the women waded waist-deep into the crystal-clear water, they noticed something unusual near a cluster of rocks about 50 meters from shore. What appeared to be a massive gray shape lay motionless in the shallow water, its distinctive triangular dorsal fin breaking the surface. Svetlana immediately recognized it as a shark, though neither woman had any experience with marine life beyond what they had seen in documentaries. Local fishermen working their nets nearby spotted the tourists approaching the stranded animal and began shouting warnings in Malagasy and broken French. However, the women either could not understand the urgent calls or chose to ignore them, too focused on what they perceived as a once-in-a-lifetime photo opportunity. Tatiana later told investigators that they assumed the shark was either dead or harmless since it appeared to be beached and barely moving. The great white shark, later estimated by marine biologists to be approximately 14 feet long and weighing nearly 2,000 pounds, had become temporarily stranded during the receding tide. However, experts would later explain that the animal was far from helpless. Great whites are known to survive in shallow water for extended periods, and this particular specimen was likely disoriented rather than dying, possibly having been pursuing seals in the rocky cove when the tide shifted. Svetlana approached the shark first, crouching beside its massive head while Tatiana positioned herself to capture the perfect selfie angle. The photographs recovered from Tatiana's waterproof camera would later show Svetlana grinning widely, her hand dangerously close to the shark's snout, completely unaware that the animal's small black eyes were tracking her movements. The camera's timestamp indicated the women spent nearly 4 minutes positioning themselves for various shots. The attack happened with devastating speed. As Svetlana leaned closer to place her hand on the shark's head for what she called the ultimate selfie, the massive predator suddenly twisted its entire body with explosive power. Its jaws, lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth, clamped down on Svetlana's torso with crushing force. The impact sent both women tumbling as the shark thrashed violently, now fully awakened and desperate to return to deeper water. Tatiana screamed as she watched her friend disappear beneath the churning water, the shark's powerful tail propelling it toward the deeper channel with Svetlana still trapped in its jaws. Blood spread rapidly through the water, creating a crimson cloud that attracted other marine scavengers to the scene. Tatiana was not spared from the chaos, as the shark's thrashing tail struck her legs, sending her sprawling onto the sharp coral with deep lacerations across her thighs and arms. The fishermen who had been trying to warn the tourists immediately dropped their nets and rushed toward the scene in their small wooden boats. Remy, their tour guide, later reported that he had never seen local fishermen move so quickly or with such determination. They managed to reach Tatiana within minutes, pulling her bleeding form from the water while scanning desperately for any sign of her companion. Despite an intensive search involving multiple boats and even a helicopter chartered by the Russian embassy, Svetlana's body was never recovered. The search continued for 5 days, covering nearly 200 square kilometers of ocean. But the strong currents and the presence of other predators made recovery unlikely. Marine biologists explained that great whites typically do not consume human prey entirely, but the powerful currents in the channel could have carried remains far from the attack site. Tatiana spent 3 weeks in a hospital in Antananarivo, recovering from severe blood loss, infected coral cuts, and psychological trauma. During her interviews with local authorities and Russian consular officials, she repeatedly insisted that they believed the shark was harmless. She described how the animal had appeared sluggish and unresponsive, leading them to assume it was either dead or too weak to pose a threat. The photographs from the incident, which captured the moments leading up to the attack, were confiscated by Malagasy authorities as evidence and never released to the public. The case prompted Madagascar's tourism ministry to install warning signs in multiple languages along popular beaches, specifically cautioning visitors about approaching any marine life, regardless of its apparent condition. The tragedy serves as a stark reminder that even experienced predators can appear deceptively vulnerable when encountered outside their natural element, yet remain capable of lethal force when threatened or disturbed. The crystal-clear waters surrounding Andros Island in the Bahamas had long been considered a photographer's paradise, particularly for those seeking to capture the ethereal beauty of underwater fashion photography. In 2017, this remote location in the world's third-largest barrier reef system became the setting for one of the most catastrophic fashion shoots in industry history. The Tongue of the Ocean, a deep-water channel that plunges to over 6,000 feet, creates a dramatic backdrop where shallow coral gardens meet the abyss, making it irresistible to photographers seeking that perfect shot. Marco Bellini, a 34-year-old Italian photographer renowned for his avant-garde underwater fashion work, had built his reputation on pushing boundaries other photographers deemed too dangerous. His portfolio included shoots with sharks, jellyfish, and other marine predators, always managing to capture stunning images while maintaining what he believed was adequate safety. Bellini had specifically chosen the Andros Barrier Reef for its population of Caribbean reef sharks, which he intended to use as living props for his latest high-fashion campaign, featuring swimwear designed by an emerging Milan-based designer. The photo shoot was scheduled to take place at a site known locally as the Blue Hole's Edge, where the shallow reef drops dramatically into the deep channel. Bellini had assembled a team of 4 professional models, 2 dive masters, and 3 underwater lighting technicians for the ambitious project. The concept involved models posed gracefully among the coral formations while reef sharks circled in the background, creating what Bellini described as a juxtaposition between human beauty and natural predation. Bellini instructed his team to deploy several floating tuna heads around the shooting area to attract the sharks and create the dramatic underwater scenes he envisioned. The photographer believed that the controlled use of bait would attract the typically shy Caribbean reef sharks, which he had worked with successfully on previous shoots. However, Bellini had not anticipated that the blood and fish oils would travel much further through the water than expected, carried by the strong currents between the shallow reef and the deep ocean channel. The morning of the shoot began smoothly, with the models and crew descending to their positions around a spectacular coral formation in about 30 feet of water. Bellini had positioned his underwater lighting rigs in a semicircle around the reef, creating dramatic illumination that would make the models appear to glow against the dark blue background of the deeper water. The first hour of shooting proceeded without incident, with several Caribbean reef sharks making brief appearances in the background, exactly as Bellini had planned. However, the situation changed dramatically when a massive tiger shark, estimated at nearly 12 feet in length, appeared from the depths of the channel. Unlike their smaller Caribbean reef cousins, tiger sharks are aggressive apex predators, known for their willingness to attack almost anything they perceive as potential prey. The animal had been drawn by the concentrated scent of blood and fish oils dispersing through the water for over an hour. Bellini was adjusting one of his underwater lighting rigs when the tiger shark approached. The photographer, focused entirely on perfecting his shot composition, failed to notice the massive predator until it was directly behind him. Following its instincts, the shark identified the moving figure manipulating equipment as potential prey, particularly given the strong scent of fish blood that permeated the water around the shooting area. The attack was swift and devastating. The tiger shark struck Bellini from behind, its powerful jaws clamping across his right hip and upper thigh. The force of the bite shattered his pelvis in multiple places, while the shark's serrated teeth tore through muscle and tissue with horrifying efficiency. The impact sent clouds of blood through the water, creating panic among the models and crew positioned nearby. Chaos erupted throughout the shooting area as the models and crew members realized what was happening. Two models, trained in emergency ascent procedures, made controlled rises to the surface while maintaining their breathing rhythm. However, the other two models panicked completely, abandoning their breathing apparatus and making rapid, dangerous ascents that later resulted in decompression sickness, requiring immediate medical attention. The dive masters responded with remarkable professionalism, immediately moving to extract Bellini from the water while fending off the tiger shark, which had released the photographer but continued circling the area. They coordinated with the surface support team, using underwater communication devices to prepare for an emergency medical evacuation. Bellini had lost consciousness during the attack, his body going into shock from the massive trauma and blood loss. The extraction process took nearly 20 minutes, during which time the tiger shark remained in the area, apparently attracted by the continued presence of the bait and the fresh blood in the water. The dive masters later reported that the shark showed clear signs of previous injuries, including what appeared to be propeller scars along its dorsal fin and back. This suggests it had survived earlier encounters with boats and might have developed heightened aggressive behavior. Bellini was airlifted to a hospital in Nassau, where a team of trauma surgeons worked for 8 hours to repair the extensive damage to his hip and pelvis. The photographer required 6 separate surgical procedures over the following months, including multiple bone grafts and the installation of titanium plates to reconstruct his shattered pelvis. Despite the severity of his injuries, Bellini survived, though he never fully regained mobility in his right leg. The fashion photographs from the shoot were never published, though they reportedly captured the entire sequence of events leading up to the attack. The images became the subject of legal disputes between the fashion house, the photographer, and various insurance companies. The incident prompted new safety regulations for underwater photography shoots involving marine wildlife, particularly regarding using bait to attract predators. The tiger shark responsible for the attack was later identified by marine biologists studying the area, recognizable by its distinctive scar patterns. The animal continued to frequent the same waters, leading to temporary restrictions on diving activities around Andros Island. The Farallon Islands, located 27 miles west of San Francisco, have earned the ominous nickname Devil's Teeth among local mariners for their jagged appearance and harboring one of the world's largest populations of great white sharks. In 2021, these remote granite outcroppings became the site of an unprecedented encounter between the United States Navy and one of the ocean's most formidable predators. The islands serve as a critical breeding ground for northern elephant seals and California sea lions, creating an abundant food source that attracts great whites across the Pacific. The USS Coastal Defender, a Freedom-class littoral combat ship conducting routine patrol operations in the Gulf of the Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, monitored unusual sonar readings throughout the morning. The vessel's sophisticated underwater detection systems had been picking up large biological signatures moving in coordinated patterns beneath the ship, which marine biologists aboard later identified as a feeding aggregation of great white sharks following the seasonal seal migration. Petty Officer First Class Jeremiah Blackwood, a 29-year-old marine technician from Portland, Oregon, was conducting routine maintenance on the ship's hull-mounted sensors when the incident occurred. Blackwood had been working near the vessel's starboard rail, approximately 8 feet above the waterline, using specialized equipment to calibrate the ship's fish finder array. The work required him to lean over the rail repeatedly, bringing him dangerously close to the water's surface while the boat maintained its slow patrol speed. The great white shark that would soon attack had followed the naval vessel for nearly 2 hours, attracted by the unusual acoustic signatures generated by the ship's sonar systems. Marine biologists studying great white behavior have documented that these predators are highly sensitive to low-frequency vibrations and electromagnetic fields, which modern naval vessels produce in significant quantities. The shark, later estimated to be approximately 15 feet in length and weighing close to 2,500 pounds, had been exhibiting increasingly aggressive investigative behavior. Captain Sarah Morrison, commanding officer of the USS Coastal Defender, later reported that the ship's fish finder displays showed large predatory fish in the immediate vicinity throughout the morning. However, naval protocol did not typically require crew members to be warned about marine life unless it directly threatened diving operations. The assumption was that crew members working on deck would be safely positioned above the water's reach. The attack occurred at approximately 11:45 a.m. Pacific time, during what appeared to be routine maintenance operations. Blackwood was using a long-handled tool to adjust one of the hull sensors when the great white launched itself partially out of the water in a behavior known as breaching. The shark's momentum carried its massive head and front portion clear of the surface, bringing its jaws into direct contact with Blackwood's lower leg as he leaned over the rail. The bite was devastating but brief. The shark's serrated teeth punctured through Blackwood's steel-toed boot and into his calf muscle, crushing bone and severing several major blood vessels before the animal's weight pulled it back into the water. The encounter lasted less than 3 seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. Blackwood's screams alerted nearby crew members, who immediately initiated emergency medical protocols. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Maria Santos, the ship's senior medical officer, responded to the emergency within minutes. Santos later described the injury as unlike anything she had encountered during her 8 years of naval service, including deployments in combat zones. The shark's bite had created a compound fracture of Blackwood's tibia and fibula, while causing severe muscle damage and arterial bleeding that required immediate surgical intervention to prevent fatal blood loss. The ship's medical bay was equipped for trauma treatment, but the severity of Blackwood's injuries exceeded their capabilities. Captain Morrison immediately ordered the vessel to speed best toward San Francisco Bay while coordinating with Coast Guard rescue services for a medical helicopter evacuation. The ship's communication officer contacted trauma surgeons at a medical center, providing real-time updates on Blackwood's condition during the high-speed transit. The great white shark responsible for the attack remained in the area for several hours after the incident, continuing to circle the naval vessel and exhibiting what marine biologists described as heightened territorial behavior. The ship's crew reported multiple additional sightings of the animal, which appeared to be investigating the vessel's hull and following its movements. This behavior was unprecedented in documented interactions between naval vessels and great white sharks. The remote location and deteriorating weather conditions complicated emergency evacuation procedures. The Coast Guard helicopter crew had to navigate through patchy fog and increasing winds to reach the USS Coastal Defender, which had maintained its course toward the mainland at maximum speed. The medical evacuation was completed successfully, with Blackwood being transferred to the helicopter. At the same time, the ship continued moving, a procedure that required exceptional skill from both naval and Coast Guard personnel. Blackwood underwent emergency surgery at a medical center, where trauma surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the extensive damage to his leg. The operation involved reconstructing shattered bone fragments, repairing severed blood vessels, and removing pieces of shark teeth that had embedded in the tissue. Despite the severity of his injuries, Blackwood retained full leg function after extensive physical therapy and rehabilitation. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of Navy safety protocols for personnel working near the water's edge in areas known for large predator activity. New guidelines require marine life assessments before crew members perform maintenance work that brings them close to the water's surface. The USS Coastal Defender's encounter also contributed to ongoing research into how naval sonar systems might inadvertently attract or agitate marine predators. Marine biologists studying the incident noted that the great white's behavior was highly unusual, as these sharks typically avoid large vessels and loud mechanical noises. The theory emerged that the combination of sonar frequencies, electromagnetic fields from the ship's systems, and abundant prey in the area may have created conditions that triggered the shark's predatory response. The attack represented the first documented case of a great white shark successfully reaching a crew member aboard a U.S. naval vessel. Blackwood returned to active duty 8 months after the attack, though he was reassigned to inland operations. He later described the encounter as a reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature and the need for constant vigilance when working in marine environments. The waters off St. Louis, Senegal, where the Senegal River meets the Atlantic Ocean, have been home to traditional fishing communities for over 1,000 years. In 2015, this ancient fishing ground became the scene of one of the most violent shark attacks ever recorded in West African waters. The confluence of fresh and salt water creates unique conditions that attract bull sharks, apex predators notorious for their ability to thrive in marine and freshwater environments, and their exceptional aggression toward anything they perceive as competition or threat. The fishing village of Guet-Ndar, built on a narrow strip of sand between the Senegal River and the Atlantic, housed families who had practiced artisanal fishing for generations. These fishermen used traditional wooden pirogues, narrow boats carved from single tree trunks, to navigate river channels and coastal waters. While perfectly adapted to local conditions, the boats offered little protection against large marine predators that occasionally ventured into the fishing grounds. Amadou Diallo, a 42-year-old fisherman who had worked these waters for over 20 years, led a small crew of 4 men in pursuit of sardinella, a small silverfish that formed the backbone of the local fishing economy. Diallo was known throughout the village for his exceptional skill in reading water conditions and his ability to locate fish schools that other fishermen missed. His boat, a 25-foot pirogue named Fatou after his eldest daughter, was considered one of the most seaworthy vessels in the village fleet. The morning of August 12th began with promising fishing conditions. The seasonal upwelling along the Senegal coast has brought nutrient-rich waters to the surface, creating ideal feeding conditions for the small fish that support the local economy and the marine food chain. Diallo and his crew had deployed their nets in approximately 40 feet of water, about 3 miles from the river mouth, where they had been experiencing exceptional catches throughout the week. The bull shark that would soon attack had been patrolling the river mouth for several days, drawn by the abundance of fish and the unique water conditions created by mixing fresh and salt water. Bull sharks are uniquely adapted to transitional environments, possessing specialized kidneys that allow them to regulate salt content in their bodies. This particular animal, later estimated by marine biologists to be approximately 10 feet long and weighing close to 400 pounds, had been feeding aggressively on the same fish stocks that the local fishermen were targeting. Diallo's crew had been hauling nets for nearly an hour when they noticed unusual disturbances in the water around their boat. The men initially attributed the commotion to a large school of fish, but the movement pattern suggested something much larger moving beneath their vessel. Ousmane Sy, Diallo's nephew and the crew's youngest member, later reported that the water around the boat had begun to feel different, with unusual currents and vibrations that none had experienced. The first impact came without warning. Operating on pure predatory instinct, the bull shark rammed the pirogue's hull with tremendous force, mistaking the wooden vessel for a competing predator or potential prey. While remarkably seaworthy under normal conditions, the traditional fishing boat construction did not match the concentrated force of a 400-pound shark moving at high speed. The initial impact cracked several of the boat's wooden planks and sent all 4 crew scrambling for balance. Before the crew could react to the first attack, the bull shark struck again, with even greater violence. The second impact, delivered to the boat's port side, opened a substantial breach in the hull that immediately began taking on water. The pirogue, designed for stability in calm waters, began listing dangerously as seawater rushed through the damaged planks. The crew's fishing nets, still partially deployed, became entangled around the boat and in the water, creating additional chaos. During the confusion of the boat's rapid flooding and the crew's attempts to secure their position, Amadou Diallo lost his footing on the wet deck and fell overboard into the churning water. The bull shark, still in an aggressive state and likely attracted by the thrashing movements and sounds of distress, immediately targeted the fisherman. Witnesses later described seeing the massive predator's distinctive blunt snout and stocky profile as it seized Diallo in its powerful jaws. The attack on Diallo was swift and fatal. The bull shark bit down on the fisherman's torso with crushing force, its teeth designed for holding and tearing rather than cutting cleanly. The predator began the violent shaking behavior typical of bull shark attacks, using its powerful neck muscles to inflict maximum damage on its victim. The other crew members, still struggling to keep their damaged boat afloat, watched in horror as their leader disappeared beneath the blood-stained water. Ousmane Sy and the remaining crew members patched the worst of the hull damage using emergency repair materials they carried for such emergencies. However, their efforts to rescue Diallo were hampered by the continued presence of the bull shark, which remained in the immediate area and showed no signs of leaving. The crew later reported that the shark appeared guarding the area, making several more aggressive passes at their damaged boat. The fishing boat limped back to shore with 3 survivors aboard, their emergency repairs barely adequate to keep the vessel afloat during the 3-mile journey to safety. Village elders who examined the damaged pirogue later confirmed that the bite marks and impact damage were consistent with a large bull shark attack. However, none had seen such aggressive behavior from the species in their decades of fishing experience. Search efforts for Diallo's body continued for 5 days, involving multiple boats from the village and assistance from the National Maritime Rescue Service. However, the strong currents at the river mouth and the presence of other scavengers made recovery impossible. The bull shark responsible for the attack was spotted several more times in the days following the incident, identifiable by distinctive scarring on its dorsal fin that witnesses had noted during the attack. The attack sent shockwaves through the fishing community of Guet-Ndar, where such violent encounters with marine predators were virtually unknown. Village elders consulted with marine biologists from a university in Dakar, who explained that bull sharks were becoming increasingly common in the area due to changes in water temperature and fish populations. The incident prompted the installation of early warning systems and forming mutual aid groups among fishing crews. Several boats remained in port for weeks following the attack, as fishermen struggled with the incident's psychological impact and concerns about returning to waters where such predators might be present. The local economy, dependent on daily fishing activities, suffered significantly as families lost their primary source of income. Government assistance programs were eventually established to help affected fishing families during recovery. Amadou Diallo was remembered throughout the region as an exceptional fisherman and community leader whose knowledge of local waters had helped sustain his village for decades. His death marked the first recorded fatal bull shark attack in Senegalese waters, leading to increased awareness of the potential dangers facing traditional fishing communities as marine ecosystems continue to change. The waters surrounding Gansbaai, South Africa, known locally as Great White Shark Alley, represent one of the world's most concentrated populations of these apex predators. In 2018, this pristine stretch of the Western Cape coastline became the setting for an extraordinary encounter that challenged conventional understanding of great white shark behavior. Sarah Peters, a 31-year-old marine psychology researcher from Cape Town, developed an unconventional approach to studying predator-prey relationships through contemplative observation. Peters believed that traditional research methods involving boats, diving cages, and multiple observers created too much disturbance to study natural shark behavior accurately. Her controversial methodology involved solo kayak expeditions to areas of high shark activity, where she would remain motionless for extended periods, allowing marine life to behave naturally around her presence. The morning of September 22nd offered perfect conditions for Peters's research. The autumn weather had settled into a pattern of calm seas and excellent visibility, with water temperatures still warm enough to support active shark populations. Peters had launched her custom-built 18-foot sea kayak from Kleinby Harbor before dawn, paddling approximately 4 miles offshore to reach the deeper waters where great whites typically hunted during daylight hours. Peters had positioned herself over a submerged reef system known to local dive operators as Shark Alley Deep, approximately 200 meters from Dyer Island. This location was strategically chosen because it sat directly in the migration path between the island's seal colonies and the deeper oceanic waters where great whites spent much of their time. The reef created an underwater canyon that funneled marine life through a relatively narrow corridor, making it an ideal ambush point for hunting sharks. Her meditation practice involved floating motionless in her kayak for up to 2 hours, using breathing techniques to minimize any movement or disturbance that might affect wildlife behavior. Peters developed this method over 3 years of research, during which she observed numerous shark species without incident. She believed that her stationary presence, controlled breathing, and minimal movement allowed her to observe predatory behavior that would be impossible to document using conventional research methods. The great white shark approaching Peters' kayak was exceptional, even by Gansby standards. Later estimates, based on photographic evidence and witness accounts, suggested the animal measured approximately 14 feet in length and weighed close to 1,800 pounds. The shark's distinctive scarring pattern, including what appeared to be propeller marks along its dorsal fin, indicated it was likely a mature female that had survived multiple encounters with boat traffic in the heavily visited research area. Peters first became aware of the shark's presence through what she later described as an instinctive feeling of being observed. Despite her eyes being closed in meditation, she reported sensing a change in the water's energy around her kayak. When she opened her eyes, the massive predator was positioned directly beneath her vessel, its distinctive white underbelly visible through the crystal clear water. The shark appeared to be investigating this unusual object that had remained stationary in its territory for over an hour. The initial contact was remarkably gentle by great white standards. Rather than striking with the explosive force typical of predatory attacks, the shark approached Peters' kayak with what marine biologists later characterized as investigative behavior. The animal used its snout to nudge the kayak's hull, testing its texture and response. This behavior, known as mouthing, is common when great whites encounter unfamiliar objects. However, the situation escalated when the shark decided to test the kayak more aggressively. Using its powerful jaws, the predator bit down on the kayak's edge near Peters' right side, applying enough pressure to puncture the vessel's hull while lifting it partially out of the water. The force of the bite, combined with the shark's weight, destabilized the kayak completely, throwing Peters into the water directly alongside the massive predator. The moment Peters entered the water, the dynamic of the encounter changed dramatically. The shark, now facing what it perceived as potential prey in its natural element, approached the researcher with more aggressive intent. However, rather than fleeing or thrashing in panic, Peters maintained the controlled breathing and minimal movement techniques she had developed during her meditation practice. This unusual response confused the predator, which circled her several times without attacking. The bite came as what marine behaviorists later classified as a test bite, rather than a full predatory attack. The great white approached Peters from below and behind, grasping her upper right arm in its jaws with enough force to puncture the wetsuit and lacerate muscle tissue, but without the crushing pressure that would have caused catastrophic injury. The shark held her briefly, assessing whether she represented food, before releasing her and swimming away. Peters later described the moment of eye contact that occurred during the brief attack as profound and life-changing. She reported that the shark's black eyes showed what she interpreted as intelligence and curiosity, rather than mindless aggression. The encounter lasted only seconds, but Peters felt that she and the predator had engaged in communication that transcended typical predator-prey relationships. Rescue came from an unexpected source. A commercial shark cage diving boat, operated by Marine Dynamics, had been conducting tourism operations approximately 500 meters away when crew members spotted the encounter through binoculars. The boat's captain, who had over 15 years of experience working with great whites, immediately recognized that Peters was in danger and initiated emergency rescue procedures. The rescue operation was complicated by the great white's continued presence, which had not left the area after releasing Peters. The dive boat crew used standard shark deterrent procedures, including underwater sound devices and careful positioning, to create enough space to extract Peters from the water. The entire rescue took nearly 20 minutes, during which the shark continued to circle the area, apparently still investigating the unusual situation. Peters' injuries, while dramatic in appearance, were not life-threatening. The shark's bite had created deep lacerations in her upper arm and shoulder, requiring 47 stitches and several months of physical therapy to restore full function. However, she avoided the crushing bone damage typical of great white attacks, likely because the shark had not committed to a full predatory bite sequence. The encounter generated significant controversy within South Africa's marine research community. Critics argued that Peters' methodology was unnecessarily dangerous and could habituate sharks to human presence, potentially increasing attack risks for other water users. However, supporters pointed to the unique behavioral data she had collected, including the first documented case of a great white shark releasing a human after a test bite without outside intervention. Peters continued her research using modified techniques, incorporating additional safety measures while maintaining her core philosophy of minimal impact observation. Her encounter contributed to evolving theories about great white shark intelligence and their ability to distinguish between different types of potential prey through investigative behavior rather than immediate aggression. The pristine atolls of the Maldives, scattered across the Indian Ocean, have long been considered among the world's safest tropical diving destinations. In 2020, this reputation was challenged when a remote atoll in the Ari chain became the site of one of the most serious shark attacks ever recorded in Maldivian waters. The location, known locally as Maya Thila, featured a World War II-era shipwreck that had become an artificial reef system, attracting diverse marine life and creating what tourism operators marketed as an ideal snorkeling destination. Emma Kruger, a 28-year-old freelance travel blogger from Munich, Germany, had arrived in the Maldives for a solo backpacking journey across South Asia. Kruger specialized in budget travel content, seeking authentic experiences away from luxury resorts. She had chosen to stay at a local guest house on Maafushi Island, which offered access to less commercialized diving sites that would provide unique content for her travel blog and social media channels. The shipwreck at Maya Thila was the remains of a British cargo vessel sunk during a German U-boat attack in 1943. Over the decades, the wreck had been colonized by corals, creating a thriving ecosystem supporting numerous tropical fish species. The site sat in shallow water, with the wreck's highest points reaching within 15 feet of the surface, making it accessible to snorkelers while offering dramatic underwater topography. Local dive operators had used the site for tourism for over 15 years without serious incidents involving dangerous marine life. The wreck's position in a sheltered lagoon, protected from strong currents, had created an environment that typically attracted smaller reef species rather than large pelagic predators. However, recent changes in local fishing practices had begun altering the site's ecosystem in dangerous ways. Emma joined a group of 8 snorkelers for a half-day excursion to explore the historic wreck. The tour was led by Ibrahim Hassan, a local guide with over a decade of experience, who had chosen this site for its reputation as safe and suitable for mixed ability groups. The morning conditions were ideal. calm seas, excellent visibility, and water temperatures around 28 degrees Celsius. The group had been in the water for approximately 45 minutes when Emma gradually drifted away while photographing colorful parrotfish. She became absorbed in her photography and lost track of her position relative to other snorkelers. The tiger shark that would attack had been drawn to the area by fish waste that local fishermen had discarded near the wreck site over the previous days. The animal, later estimated at approximately 11 feet in length, had been patrolling the area for at least 24 hours. Emma realized something was wrong when she could no longer see her group. She had been following a school of fish along the wreck's port side when she discovered she had drifted nearly 100 meters from the others. As she began swimming back, she noticed a large shadow moving beneath the wreck's broken hull sections, initially assuming it was a large grouper or ray. The tiger shark's approach was methodical rather than explosive. The predator had been investigating unusual activity around the wreck and identified Emma as potential prey based on her isolated position. Tiger sharks are known for persistent hunting behavior, often stalking prey for extended periods before attacking. The shark followed Emma for several minutes, staying at the edge of her peripheral vision. The attack came from below as Emma attempted to photograph what she believed was a large fish beneath the wreck. The tiger shark struck with tremendous force, its powerful jaws clamping down on Emma's left leg just above the knee. The impact drove her underwater as the shark's weight overwhelmed her ability to remain at the surface. The predator's serrated teeth created devastating lacerations through her wetsuit and into underlying muscle tissue. Other group members heard Emma's partially muffled screams and immediately swam toward her location. Ibrahim Hassan responded remarkably quickly, grabbing a weighted dive pole and swimming directly toward the attack site. He later reported seeing the tiger shark's distinctive stripe pattern clearly as it maintained its grip on Emma's leg. Hassan used his dive pole to strike the shark repeatedly around its head and gills while positioning himself between predator and victim. The sustained assault eventually convinced the animal to release Emma, though it continued circling while Hassan and two others worked to get her to the surface. Emma had lost consciousness during the underwater struggle, having swallowed significant seawater while being dragged down. The rescue required exceptional courage as the team supported Emma's unconscious body while swimming toward their boat, complicated by substantial blood loss and the shark's continued presence. Emergency medical evacuation followed, with Emma airlifted to Malé, where trauma surgeons worked 7 hours to repair extensive leg damage. Despite severe injuries, she retained full leg function after months of rehabilitation. The attack prompted a comprehensive review of snorkeling safety protocols at wreck sites throughout the Maldives. Investigations revealed that fish waste disposal near diving sites had attracted dangerous predators, leading to new regulations governing fishing activities around tourist areas. The incident became a media sensation, sparking debates about waste management near snorkel zones, while highlighting the need for stricter safety measures in marine tourism operations.